Russian TV is crafting a narrative of Ukraine's inevitable capitulation. In the December 11th, 2025, program Evening with Solovyov, the Russian television host continues to build a familiar narrative. Ukraine is a decaying and externally manipulated state. The West is divided and tired. The US, represented by Donald Trump, is ready to make a deal with Moscow, and Europe is the main brake on peace. A separate layer is the direct threats against British troops and the wholesale dehumanization of Ukrainian and European politicians. This episode can conveniently be viewed as a distillation of several key strategies of contemporary Russian propaganda. 1. Initial frame: Ukraine as an object, Europe as a noisy extra. The program begins with the thesis that Ukraine is ignoring Washington's signals, and European leaders are merely annoying interference. The Macron-Scholz-Starmer triad, plus Tusk, von der Leyen and Callas, is derided as three little pigs and bastards who prepared a proposal for what remains of Ukrainian lands. In this framework, Ukraine is deprived of agency. Its territory is discussed without it, like property to be divided between the powerful. European leaders are portrayed as illegitimate participants. "Who are you to say anything?" is a literal statement. Only the US and Russia are the true subjects of the negotiations. Everyone else is window dressing. For the viewer, this is an important signal. Any EU statements on Ukraine are declared insignificant and hypocritical in advance, and the country's future will supposedly be decided solely within the direct Moscow-Washington axis. 2. Donald Trump as the judge of Ukrainian democracy. They're fantasizing about sending their troops to Ukraine as peacekeepers, so to speak. For us, these so-called peacekeepers will immediately become legitimate targets. We must understand this. Now we've been forced to acknowledge the direct participation of British troops and special forces in the war against Russia. After one of them died, and the British government could no longer conceal these circumstances, it was announced that at least 100 British soldiers are fighting against the Russian Federation. Of course, this was just yesterday evening, this morning. Of course, we will draw all the necessary conclusions from this latest manifestation of the true nature of the British regime. Clearly, intelligence will soon report the precise location of these British scumbags, and they will all be eliminated. No amount of escrow will be spared for this. But what's curious is that Europe still ignores Ukrainian corruption. It's silent. The central theme is the repeated quotation of Trump. His words about 82% of Ukrainians demanding a peace agreement, that Ukraine hasn't held elections in a long time, and that Zelensky is using the war to avoid them. From this, several conclusions are drawn on the air. Zelensky's legitimacy is declared exhausted, not only from Moscow's perspective, but also through references to the US president. Trump's initiatives are presented as the will of the Ukrainian people. The host directly states that this is a response to Europeans who repeat the formula, "Only the Ukrainian people can decide whether elections are necessary." In Solovyov's interpretation, the people have already spoken, through the poll and through Trump's position. Elections are transformed not into a democratic instrument, but into a tool of pressure. If Ukraine doesn't hold a vote, it confirms its undemocratic nature and loses its right to support. 3. Normalization of direct threats, British military as legitimate targets. A separate section concerns the death of British paratrooper Josh Hooley in Ukraine. The story is presented in a way that maximizes the scope of the conflict. It emphasizes that he is a regular paratrooper and not a member of the Special Forces, meaning Britain's participation is massive, not exceptional. Claims are made that at least 100 British soldiers are fighting against Russia. The conclusion is that such military personnel are legitimate targets, their bases must be destroyed, and Russia will not spare Iskander missiles. It is important for European readers to note, such statements are made on primetime television on a state-controlled television channel, in a polemic, but without qualification or distance. The threat of destroying British facilities is presented as a natural continuation of the logic of war, not as an extreme escalation. This serves two functions simultaneously: internal mobilization, demonstrating readiness for confrontation with NATO; testing reactions, creating a backdrop in which possible strikes against Western advisors or infrastructure will be perceived as pre-announced and justified. 4. War above law. Let the guns roar. Midway through the discussion, one of the guests formulates the key thesis. Let the guns roar, let the guns roar, since international laws are already dead. This is how they explain to the Russian audience: the current world order is unworkable, which means any EU complaints about Russian aggression are meaningless. If Moscow wins the war, that is precisely the new norm.